Does something around you feel strange? Is there something watching or listening to you without your knowledge? Today, I'm going to share a story that will keep you thinking all night. But before we begin, if you're brave enough and enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like and support us. And make sure to subscribe, because the upcoming stories are going to be even more terrifying. It all started on a rainy Friday evening, the kind that makes you want to curl up under a blanket with a good book. But instead of comfort, I found myself scrolling through forums late into the night, my curiosity piqued by tales of the dark web. I had heard whispers about it, a hidden part of the internet where anything could be bought or sold, where anonymity reigned supreme. It was a world shrouded in mystery and danger, and I was inexplicably drawn to it. After hours of browsing, I stumbled upon a thread titled, "Looking for Help, High Pay, No Experience Required." My heart raced as I clicked on it. The post was vague yet enticing, promising a substantial payout for simple tasks. The poster, who went by the username Shadowmaster, claimed that he needed help with data entry for his business. My mind raced with possibilities. Was this a scam? A trap? But desperation had taken hold. I was drowning in student debt and struggling to make ends meet. I hesitated, but ultimately decided to respond. Within minutes, I received a reply that sent chills down my spine. Shadowmaster instructed me to download a secure messaging app and promised that all communications would be encrypted. The thrill of secrecy was intoxicating. I followed his instructions, my fingers trembling as I typed my first message: "I'm interested." The next few days were a blur of messages back and forth. Shadowmaster was meticulous, outlining the tasks in cryptic terms that only fueled my anxiety. He spoke of collecting information and monitoring activities, but never clarified what kind of data I would be handling. Each time I asked for more details, he would deflect my questions with vague reassurances about confidentiality and payment. Finally, he sent me a link to a website that looked like something out of a hacker movie: black background, green text, and an array of seemingly random numbers and letters scrolling across the screen. "This is your first assignment," he said. "You need to access this database and extract specific information." My heart raced. This felt like stepping into a world far beyond my understanding. As I navigated the site, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me. The data was unsettling: names, addresses, personal details of people who seemed completely ordinary, but were tied to something sinister. It was like peering into the lives of strangers who had no idea their information was being exploited. I spent hours sifting through the data, my mind racing with questions about what Shadowmaster intended to do with it all. Was this just data entry, or was I unwittingly becoming part of something much darker? The more I worked, the more paranoid I became. Every notification on my phone felt like someone watching me. Then came the moment that shattered any illusion of normalcy. Late one night, as I was deep into my work, I received an unexpected video call from Shadowmaster. His face was obscured by shadows. All I could see were his piercing eyes staring directly at me through the screen. "You're doing well," he said in a low voice that sent shivers down my spine. "But remember, curiosity can be dangerous." The call ended abruptly, leaving me breathless and terrified. My heart raced as I realized how deep I had gotten into this web of deceit and danger. What had started as a desperate attempt to earn money had spiraled into something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. I knew then that there was no turning back. This segment sets up an intriguing premise while establishing an atmosphere of suspense and dread that will keep viewers engaged as they anticipate what happens next in your horror story series. After that chilling video call with Shadowmaster, I found it increasingly difficult to focus on my tasks. My mind was racing with thoughts of what I had gotten myself into. I had signed up for a job that was supposed to be simple, but now it felt like I was entangled in a web of secrets and danger that I could barely comprehend. For days, I continued to work on extracting data from the database. Each night, I would sit in my dimly lit room, staring at the screen as lines of personal information scrolled past me. Names, addresses, phone numbers. Each piece of data felt like a thread connecting me to lives I had no right to invade. Yet, the allure of the money kept me going. I needed this. I needed to pay off my debts and finally feel some sense of security. But as the days turned into weeks, something shifted. My dreams became haunted by the faces of those whose information I was sifting through. I would wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing, feeling as if someone was watching me from the shadows. The paranoia seeped into my daily life. Every glance over my shoulder made me feel like someone was tailing me. One evening, after a particularly long session of data extraction, I received another message from Shadowmaster. This time it was different. There was an urgency in his tone that made my stomach churn. "We need to escalate," he wrote. "You've proven yourself capable, but now it's time for more serious work." I hesitated before responding. What could be more serious than what I was already doing? But my curiosity got the better of me. "What do you mean?" I typed back. "Meet me at this location," he replied with a link to a map pinning a spot in an abandoned industrial area on the outskirts of town. "We need to discuss your next assignment in person." My heart raced at the thought of meeting him face to face. A part of me screamed to run away from this nightmare, but another part, the part that craved financial relief, urged me to go. After all, how dangerous could it be? Surely he wouldn't harm someone who had been so useful to him. That night, I donned a hooded sweatshirt and made my way to the meeting spot, my heart pounding with every step. The air was thick with fog as I approached the dilapidated building, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. It looked like a scene straight out of a horror movie. As I stepped inside, I was enveloped by darkness. The faint sound of dripping water echoed through the empty halls as I navigated my way deeper into the building. With each step, my anxiety mounted. Every shadow seemed alive. Every creak of the floorboards felt ominous. Suddenly, a voice broke through the silence. "You came." It was Shadow Master, his figure emerging from the darkness like a ghost. His face was still obscured by shadows, but his presence felt overwhelming. "What do you want?" I asked, trying to mask my fear with bravado. He stepped closer, and for a brief moment I caught a glimpse of his face, a gaunt visage with hollow cheeks and piercing eyes that seemed to see right through me. "I need you to understand what we're doing here," he said slowly. "This isn't just about data entry anymore, it's about power." Before I could respond, he handed me a folder filled with printed documents and photographs, images of people who looked completely normal but were tied to something far more sinister than I could have ever imagined. "These are our targets," he said flatly. "Targets?" My voice trembled as confusion washed over me. "Yes," he continued without missing a beat. "We're going to collect information on them, everything we can find, and then, well, let's just say they won't be able to hide anymore." A wave of nausea hit me as reality sank in. This wasn't just data entry, this was surveillance, stalking innocent people under the guise of business. "I can't do this," I stammered, backing away instinctively. Shadow Master's demeanor shifted instantly, his eyes narrowed dangerously. "You don't have a choice," he hissed. "You've already committed yourself by accepting this job." I felt trapped in his gaze, paralyzed by fear and regret. The adrenaline surged through my veins as panic set in. This wasn't just about money anymore, it was about morality and survival. "I'm leaving," I said firmly, turning on my heel and rushing toward the exit. "Think carefully about your next move," he called after me, his voice echoing ominously in the empty hallways. "If you walk away now, you'll regret it." I burst out into the night air, gasping for breath, as if emerging from underwater. My mind raced with thoughts. Could he really hurt me? Would he track me down if I tried to escape? The weight of what had just happened settled heavily on my shoulders. For days after that encounter, I lived in fear. Every knock at my door sent chills down my spine. Every car that passed by felt like a potential threat lurking just out of sight. My once ordinary life had transformed into a waking nightmare where shadows seemed to follow me everywhere. Despite my best efforts to distance myself from Shadow Master and his sinister plans, he continued to send messages, cryptic reminders that he was still watching, still waiting for me to return to him. Each notification sent waves of anxiety crashing over me. It felt like being trapped in an endless loop where escape seemed impossible. Then, one fateful night changed everything. I was sitting alone in my apartment when there was an unexpected knock at my door, a loud bang that echoed through the silence like thunderclaps in a stormy sky. My heart raced as dread washed over me. Who could it be? Cautiously peering through the peephole revealed nothing but darkness outside my door. Gathering courage, I opened it slightly and called out into the hallway, "Hello." Silence answered back. Just as I began to close the door again, something caught my eye, a slip of paper wedged beneath it. My hands trembled as I picked it up and unfolded it slowly. "You can't hide forever." The message sent chills down my spine. It felt like an omen, a reminder that Shadow Master's reach extended beyond our digital interactions into my real life. Panic surged within me as thoughts raced through my mind. Was he outside? Had he come for me? In that moment of sheer terror, I made a decision. I needed help. I reached out to an old friend from college who had connections in cybersecurity and law enforcement. After explaining everything, my desperate need for money leading me down this dark path, he agreed to meet with me immediately. We met at a local cafe under dim lighting where whispers felt safe amidst clinking cups and muffled conversations around us. As I recounted my experience with Shadowmaster and his demands for surveillance work on innocent people, concern etched itself across his face. "You need to report this," he urged after listening intently. "This is serious. You're dealing with someone who has no regard for human life." But what if he finds out? My voice quivered at the thought of Shadowmaster retaliating against anyone who dared cross him. "We'll take precautions," he assured me firmly. "But we can't let him continue this unchecked." With newfound determination fueled by fear and anger at what had transpired over these weeks, I agreed. The next day marked a turning point in my life. We went straight to law enforcement, where they took down every detail meticulously, while assuring me they would look into Shadowmaster's activities online immediately. Days turned into weeks filled with anxiety as investigators worked tirelessly behind closed doors while keeping me updated on their progress whenever possible, but every tick-tock felt like an eternity spent waiting for something terrible to happen. Then came another message from Shadowmaster, a chilling reminder that he wouldn't let go easily. "You think you can escape? You'll pay for your betrayal." At that moment, realization hit hard. I had crossed an invisible line between two worlds, one where fear ruled everything around me, versus one filled with hope yet uncertain outcomes ahead. As darkness loomed closer than ever before, I steeled myself against whatever lay ahead, knowing deep down there would be no turning back now. This segment expands significantly on your story's tension and character development, while maintaining suspenseful elements throughout the narrative arc. It sets up further developments for future segments while keeping viewers engaged with relatable emotions and high stakes. The days that followed my decision to involve law enforcement felt like an eternity. My life had become a series of anxious moments, each one punctuated by the ever-present fear of Shadowmaster's retaliation. I had crossed a line, and I knew it. The thought of him lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike, was enough to keep me awake at night. Despite the overwhelming dread, I tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy. I went to classes, met with friends, and even attempted to focus on my studies. But every time my phone buzzed, my heart would race, expecting another chilling message from Shadowmaster. Each notification felt like a countdown to something inevitable. Then came the day when everything changed. It was a typical Wednesday evening when I received a call from my friend in law enforcement. "We've got some leads," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "We need you to come down to the station for a briefing." My stomach dropped. I knew this could either mean safety or danger, an end to this nightmare, or a deeper plunge into chaos. I agreed to meet him immediately. At the station, I was ushered into a small conference room where several officers were gathered around a table strewn with files and photographs. My friend introduced me to an investigator who specialized in cybercrime. "Thank you for coming," he said, his demeanor professional yet empathetic. "We've been tracking Shadowmaster's activities online, and we believe we're closing in on him." I felt a flicker of hope mixed with anxiety. "What do you mean? Do you know who he is?" The investigator nodded. "We have some leads based on your data extraction work and additional intel we've gathered from other sources." He paused, looking me directly in the eyes. "But we need your help to confirm his identity." "What do you want me to do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "We need you to log back into the dark web," he explained carefully. "We believe Shadowmaster will reach out again if he thinks you're still interested in working for him. We want you to act as bait." The idea sent chills down my spine. The thought of returning to that dark world filled me with dread, but I understood the necessity of it. If this was the way to bring him down, I had no choice but to comply. That night, I prepared myself mentally for what lay ahead. I set up my laptop in a secure location and used a VPN to mask my IP address. My heart raced as I navigated back into the depths of the dark web, each click echoing like a drumbeat in my ears. After what felt like an eternity of waiting, a message popped up on my screen. "I see you're back." My breath caught in my throat as recognition washed over me. It was Shadowmaster. The familiar dread returned, but I steeled myself against it. "I'm interested in more work," I typed back, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. "Good," he replied almost instantly. "Meet me tomorrow night at our usual spot." The meeting location was the same abandoned building where we had met before, the very place that had filled me with terror just weeks earlier. My heart raced as I realized how close I was getting to him again. This time, however, there would be backup waiting nearby. As night fell, I made my way to the building once more, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The streets were eerily quiet, even the wind seemed hesitant to disturb the silence that enveloped me. When I arrived at the entrance, I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The darkness swallowed me whole as I moved deeper into the building. My phone vibrated in my pocket, a signal from law enforcement that they were ready and watching from a distance. "Shadow Master," I called out tentatively into the void. A figure emerged from the shadows, his face still obscured but his presence unmistakable. "You came back," he said with an unsettling calmness that sent shivers down my spine. "I'm here for work," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me from within. He stepped closer, his eyes glinting with something dark and predatory. "I knew you would return. People like us are drawn to power." "What do you want me to do?" I asked, forcing myself not to back away. He handed me another folder, this one thicker than before, and leaned in closer so that his breath brushed against my ear as he whispered ominously this time, "It's different. These are not just targets, they're threats." As he spoke about each person listed in that folder, detailing their lives and connections, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me again. This wasn't just surveillance, it was something far more sinister, an orchestrated plan that could ruin lives without remorse. Suddenly, there was movement outside, a flash of lights cutting through the darkness as law enforcement moved in on cue. In that moment of chaos, Shadow Master's demeanor shifted, his calm facade shattered into anger and desperation. "You think you can stop this?" he spat out as he turned toward the exit, only to find officers blocking his path. "Get down!" someone shouted from behind me as chaos erupted around us. I dropped instinctively as officers rushed forward, apprehending Shadow Master before he could escape. The tension in the air crackled like electricity as they secured him against the wall. "Are you okay?" My friend rushed over to check on me while officers continued restraining Shadow Master. I think so," I stammered, still processing what had just happened. As they led Shadow Master away in handcuffs, relief flooded through me. This nightmare was finally coming to an end. But even amidst that relief lingered an unsettling feeling. Had we truly stopped him? Or had we merely scratched the surface of something much darker? Days turned into weeks as investigations continued into Shadow Master's network, the fallout revealing connections that ran deeper than anyone had anticipated. It became clear that this wasn't just one man operating alone. There were others involved who remained hidden within those dark corners of cyberspace. While law enforcement worked tirelessly behind closed doors on dismantling this network piece by piece, I found solace in knowing that justice was being pursued for those whose lives had been affected by Shadow Master's actions. Yet, even with closure slowly approaching, I couldn't shake off an uneasy feeling deep within me, a sense that shadows lingered just beyond reach, waiting patiently for their moment. This segment builds upon the tension established earlier, while moving towards a climax where confrontation occurs between the protagonist and Shadow Master. It also leaves room for further developments and reflections on morality and justice as your story progresses. The days following Shadow Master's arrest felt surreal. I had expected a sense of relief, a weight lifted from my shoulders, but instead, I was engulfed in a fog of uncertainty. The thrill of having faced my fears was quickly overshadowed by the haunting memories of everything that had transpired. I found myself replaying every moment in my mind, the initial thrill of curiosity, the descent into darkness, and finally, the confrontation that had changed everything. As news of Shadow Master's arrest spread through local media, I became an unwilling participant in my own story. Journalists camped outside my apartment, eager for a first-hand account of my experience. I felt like a ghost in my own life, watching from behind closed doors as my reality became fodder for sensational headlines. "Student caught in dark web nightmare," one article proclaimed, while another labeled me the accidental accomplice. I had never wanted this attention. I just wanted to put it all behind me. But with each passing day, it became increasingly difficult to escape the shadows that loomed over me. In an effort to regain some semblance of normalcy, I returned to campus and resumed attending classes. Yet even in familiar surroundings, I felt like an outsider. Conversations buzzed around me, friends discussing assignments, weekend plans, but I was lost in my thoughts, haunted by the faces of those whose lives had been impacted by Shadow Master's actions. One evening, while sitting in a cafe with a friend, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I glanced around nervously, scanning the room for any sign of danger. My friend noticed my discomfort and asked if I was okay. "It's just everything that happened," I replied hesitantly. "I can't help but feel like it's not over." "Maybe you should talk to someone," she suggested gently. "A therapist or counselor could help you process everything." The idea made sense. After all, I had been through a traumatic experience. But the thought of opening up about my fears felt daunting. What would I even say? How could I explain something so surreal? Despite my reservations, I decided to take her advice and scheduled an appointment with a campus counselor. During our first session, I found myself grappling with emotions I hadn't fully acknowledged: fear, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of vulnerability. "It's normal to feel this way after such an intense experience," the counselor assured me as we talked through my feelings. "You faced something terrifying and took action to protect yourself and others." "But what if he comes back?" I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "What if there are others out there just like him?" The counselor nodded thoughtfully. "It's understandable to feel anxious about potential threats, especially when you've been exposed to something so dark. But remember that you're not alone in this. There are people who want to help you stay safe." As our sessions continued, I began to unpack the layers of fear and anxiety that had built up inside me. Each conversation helped me process what had happened and reclaim parts of myself that felt lost in the chaos. Yet despite these efforts at healing, shadows still lurked at the edges of my mind. Reminders of what had transpired and what could still be lurking in the dark corners of cyberspace. One night, as I lay in bed unable to sleep, my phone buzzed on the nightstand, a notification from a news app alerting me to a developing story. Shadow Master escapes custody. My heart dropped as dread washed over me. How could this be happening? Panic surged through me as I read further. Details emerged about how he had managed to slip away during transport after a scheduled court appearance. Fear gripped me tightly. He was out there again. I immediately called my friend from law enforcement, desperation lacing my voice as I explained what had happened. "We're doing everything we can," he assured me over the phone. "We'll find him. We have teams working around the clock." But his words did little to quell my anxiety. It felt like a nightmare that refused to end. Days turned into weeks, filled with uncertainty as news reports continued to circulate about Shadow Master's escape. Speculation about his whereabouts ran rampant, while law enforcement worked tirelessly behind closed doors trying to track him down. I couldn't shake off the feeling that he was watching me. Every creak in my apartment sounded like footsteps, creeping closer. My once comfortable home transformed into a prison filled with paranoia, where shadows danced menacingly along walls. Then came another chilling message, a text from an unknown number. "You thought you could escape? You're still part of this." My heart raced as panic surged through me again. It felt like Shadow Master was taunting me from afar, reminding me that no matter how hard I tried to distance myself from him or his actions, I would always be connected by this dark thread. I reached out to law enforcement. Again, they assured me they were investigating any potential leads related to his whereabouts, but urged me not to engage further or respond directly if he attempted contact again. That night marked another sleepless one filled with anxiety as nightmares plagued my mind. Visions of Shadow Master lurking outside my window or appearing unexpectedly in crowded spaces haunted every moment until dawn broke through. Despite feeling trapped within this cycle, I knew deep down that I couldn't let fear control me any longer. It was time for action rather than retreating into darkness once more. With newfound determination fueled by anger at being victimized, I began researching ways to protect myself online, learning about cybersecurity measures and digital safety protocols that would help shield against potential threats lurking within those virtual realms. I also took self-defense classes offered on campus, learning techniques that empowered me physically while bolstering confidence within myself emotionally during moments when doubt threatened to creep back in. As weeks passed slowly, yet steadily, I began reclaiming pieces of myself lost amidst chaos, finding strength through community support from friends who rallied around me during difficult times, reminding me that resilience could emerge even amid darkness. Then came a breakthrough. The police finally apprehended Shadowmaster after gathering intelligence on his movements, leading them directly toward an abandoned warehouse where he'd been hiding out since escaping custody. Relief washed over me like a wave crashing against rocky shores, knowing he was back behind bars where he belonged. But even amidst this victory, I couldn't shake off lingering doubts about what lay ahead for those affected by his actions beyond just myself alone. As news broke about his capture, I received another message from law enforcement, a request for assistance regarding ongoing investigations into other individuals connected within his network who remained elusive despite their efforts thus far. This time, though, I felt ready. Not only because justice needed serving, but also because closure awaited those whose lives had been disrupted by this man's choices, including mine. I agreed without hesitation, knowing deep down that standing up against darkness would empower others, while allowing healing pathways forward toward brighter days ahead, where shadows no longer held sway over our lives. This segment explores deeper emotional themes, while continuing the narrative arc surrounding Shadowmaster's escape and its impact on the protagonist's psyche. It sets up further developments regarding justice and healing as your story progresses. With Shadowmaster back in custody, a sense of relief washed over me, but it was tinged with an unsettling awareness that the scars of my experience would take time to heal. I had faced darkness and emerged on the other side, but the journey ahead was still fraught with challenges. The investigation into his network continued, and I found myself drawn into a world that demanded courage and resilience. As law enforcement worked to dismantle the remnants of Shadowmaster's operations, they sought my assistance in identifying other individuals who had been involved. I was invited to meet with a team of investigators who specialized in cybercrime, and I felt a mix of apprehension and determination as I stepped into the conference room filled with officers and analysts. "Thank you for coming," one of the lead investigators said, gesturing for me to take a seat. "We want to ensure we're thorough in our investigation, and your insights could be invaluable." I nodded, feeling a sense of purpose swell within me. This was my chance to contribute to something greater than myself, to help others who had been victimized by Shadowmaster's actions. As we discussed what I knew about his operations and the data I had encountered during my time working for him, I felt empowered. Each detail I shared felt like reclaiming a piece of my narrative. The investigators were attentive, taking notes and asking questions that prompted me to dig deeper into my memories. "Did he ever mention any associates or connections?" one officer asked. I thought back to our conversations, how he had spoken about targets and business. He mentioned people in passing, I recalled, but it was always vague. He liked to keep things secretive. "Any names or specific details?" another investigator pressed. I shook my head, frustration bubbling up inside me. "No, just a sense that there were others involved, people who were equally dangerous." As the meeting concluded, I felt a mix of exhaustion and relief. It was cathartic to share my experiences, but it also reminded me of how deeply intertwined my life had become with Shadowmaster's dark web. The investigators assured me they would keep me updated on any developments. In the following weeks, I continued attending therapy sessions while staying involved with law enforcement's efforts to track down those connected to Shadowmaster. Each day brought new challenges as I navigated my emotions, some days feeling strong and empowered, while others left me vulnerable and anxious. One evening, as I sat in my apartment reflecting on everything that had transpired, a knock at the door startled me. My heart raced as I approached cautiously. Every instinct screamed at me to be careful. Peering through the peephole revealed a familiar face, my friend from law enforcement. "Hey," he said when I opened the door. "I wanted to check in on you." "Thanks for coming," I replied, inviting him inside. "I've been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately." He nodded sympathetically as he took a seat on my couch. "That's understandable. You've been through a lot." We talked for hours about everything, my experiences with Shadow Master, the ongoing investigation, and how I was coping with it all. He listened intently, offering support without judgment. "You know," he said thoughtfully after a pause, "what you did took real courage. Not everyone would have stepped up like you did." His words resonated deep within me. Perhaps there was strength hidden beneath the layers of fear that had clouded my mind for so long. It was empowering to hear someone acknowledge my bravery in confronting such darkness. As our conversation continued, he shared stories from his own work, cases that had left their mark on him as well. It was comforting to know that even those who dedicated their lives to fighting crime faced struggles of their own. Eventually, our discussion shifted toward healing, how important it was not only for victims but also for those who served as protectors against evil forces lurking in society. "I think you should consider sharing your story more publicly," he suggested gently. "You have a voice that can inspire others who might be going through similar experiences." The idea caught me off guard. Could sharing my story truly make a difference? Would it help others feel less alone? As we talked further about potential platforms, blogs, or community events, I felt a spark ignite within me, a desire not just for healing, but also for advocacy. In the weeks that followed, I began drafting an outline for what would become an article detailing my experiences. A raw account of facing fear head-on while navigating the complexities surrounding mental health after trauma. I poured myself into writing, a therapeutic process where every word became an outlet for emotions, long suppressed beneath layers of anxiety and doubt. Finally, after countless revisions and edits, I hit send on my submission. It felt like releasing a weight that had burdened me for far too long. The article was published online within days, and as readers began sharing their responses, it became clear that my story resonated deeply with many. Messages flooded in from people thanking me for being brave enough to speak out, sharing their own struggles with trauma or feelings of isolation, stemming from similar experiences they'd faced in their lives. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt connected, not just through shared pain, but also through collective strength emerging from vulnerability, transformed into empowerment. As time passed, the investigation into Shadow Master's network continued yielding results. Multiple arrests were made as law enforcement dismantled various operations tied back to him, each success bringing justice closer not only for myself, but also for countless others affected by his actions across different communities. While healing remained an ongoing journey, I found solace knowing that by sharing my story, I had contributed toward creating awareness around issues related to cybercrime, while fostering understanding about mental health challenges faced by survivors navigating their paths forward amidst darkness. This segment focuses on healing and empowerment, while showcasing the protagonist's growth after trauma. It sets up further developments regarding advocacy and community support as your story progresses. Months passed since Shadow Master's arrest, and life began to settle into a new rhythm. The shadows that once loomed over me had started to recede, replaced by a sense of purpose and resilience. I continued to write about my experiences, sharing insights on mental health and the importance of seeking help after trauma. Each article I published seemed to resonate with others, creating a community of support that blossomed around shared experiences. I also became involved in local advocacy groups focused on cyber safety and mental health awareness. Speaking at events, I shared my story, hoping to empower others who might find themselves in similar situations. Each time I stood before an audience, I felt a surge of strength. transforming my fear into a message of hope. One evening, as I wrapped up another successful event, my friend from law enforcement approached me with a smile. "You've come so far," he said, pride shining in his eyes. "You're making a real difference." His words filled me with warmth. I had faced darkness and emerged stronger, not just for myself, but for others too. As I looked out at the faces in the crowd, each one reflecting their own battles, I realized that healing was not just personal, it was collective. In that moment, I understood that while the shadows of my past would always be a part of me, they no longer defined who I was. Instead, they had shaped me into someone who could stand tall against adversity, a survivor with a voice ready to inspire change. And with that realization came a profound sense of peace. A new beginning awaited me, filled with possibilities and hope for brighter days ahead. This segment provides closure to the protagonist's journey while emphasizing themes of empowerment and community support. It encapsulates the transformation from fear to strength, leaving viewers with an uplifting message.